As you know, of the report drafted by Inquiry Chairman Jerome Lynch, King's Counsel, said the Director of Public Prosecutions should consider charging the Paria Fuel Trading Company with corporate manslaughter, while the company and its contractor LMCS might also be charged under the Occupational Safety and Health Act. That's OSHA, of course. And you know, we're talking about the victims, of course, of that Paria tragedy. Joining us is attorney at law Ved Trebouhansingh, and he's going to, of course, fill in some gaps for us. Pleasant good evening and welcome to the Observer.
Pleasant good night, sir. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. People have been waiting for quite some time, having this, of course, finally been released. Attorney Prakash Ramadar has agreed with the findings of the Paria Commission of Inquiry, which said it was difficult to prosecute any individual over the February 25th, 2022 tragedy in which the four divers were killed at Paria Fuel Trading Company's Point-a-Pier facility. And upon hearing that, of course, many folks were just thinking that, will there ever be justice meted out to the families of these victims? Where do we go from here, sir?
Well, presently, at this stage, having received the report, now the public knows that a purpose has been served. And by publishing this report, we are all now well aware that the appropriate individuals, having in their possession all the information before them, they were able to conduct a critical analysis of what truly happened on the date in question to give us answers that the public had been seeking for quite some time now. And of course, based on our commissioner's response, it is clear that steps must be taken. And he has placed it into the hands of our authorities, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, to now proceed, take the mantle, and do that which is necessary. Of course, this is not just about justice for members of the public, but more so for members of the family who have suffered. And this is an understatement, the ordeal that they have been put through. So moving forward now, we are hopeful not only do these authorities take steps against the individuals, against the companies, but that it puts the companies in a position to reflect. And now for themselves, the representatives who reflect these companies, to do something about this. So given that it's such a short space of time, from the day the report was published to now, we are patiently awaiting, of course not indefinitely because we are working with timelines, but we are awaiting a response, and we are hopeful that a positive response is forthcoming so that steps can be taken to assist these families so that they can achieve some level of justice for what was done, and then by extension that the authorities do their part so that justice can prevail, so that we can grow as a society.
Yeah, but Mr. Trebouhansingh, of course, when you talk about, the corporate structure and what we've learned throughout history here in Trinidad and Tobago, in the psyche of many of us, we don't believe that any of these individuals or whoever may be hiding behind that corporate cloak is ever going to be prosecuted or ever going to be able to stand justice, because it seems as though it's very, how do I put it? I mean, people just simply do not have confidence in the process. And what do you say based on this tragedy that took place?
Well, I would say that, firstly, that's a very relevant and valid question. What you're asking lies at the core of what creates these corporations, these entities. And they are individuals. And these individuals who were once put in a position, the position that would have resulted in deaths of 5 members of our country, we must now reflect upon ourselves and ask, do we want to do this going forward? And there must be total change. And if that total change, it comes from the roots, from the point where even as simple as reappointing members in the appropriate boards, having proper processes to thoroughly ensure that the persons who are hired in these positions are able to effectively execute a role that they have the mental strength, that they have the intelligence, the competence, the experience. It must be revamped and start from the ground up. It is a harsh reality, and I would say that it is something that most may question whether we as a people are able to do it. But I have faith that it can be done, but it has to start from the ground up.
And one would have thought that when the energy minister laid this in Parliament on Friday, that over the weekend we would have heard news about the whole, those who were in charge, those who were at the helm at Paria would have already been dismissed and sent home, even at least first thing on Monday morning. But Mr. Ramadan made it quite clear that there is, of course, a strong case. He referred to the testimonies of Paria officials to the commission to support the argument. And he made it clear when he said it was quite clear that from the minute the divers were sucked into the pipe, time was of the essence to save them. The countdown to save the divers began from the moment they were sucked into that pipe. But yet still no one seems to say, listen, I was there, I'm held responsible, this is what took place. So you must understand, from public perception, not having much confidence in this. Why?
Indeed, and I do fully agree, and as my senior so rightfully expressed from the onset, the moment this happened, the moment discretion was not accurately exercised, changes ought to have been made. We did not need a commission to tell us every single detail. We as a people, we as a nation should know that when some wrong has occurred, when errors have happened, errors beyond a reasonable justification, and they were committed by individuals who were put in a position of power and authority, there must be change. And this is why our hope as representatives of the families of the deceased divers, it is our hope that at the end of this process that these changes do come about. And whilst I can state for the record that it is late, this should have been done from the onset when this incident occurred. It was not done. But now we have a report. A commission was convened to reveal information that we now have in our possession. It has become clear we must act. And I do call upon our government to do something about this. I do call upon the relevant authorities to do something about this.
And I believe that every right-thinking citizen is definitely going to be echoing those sentiments. We are going to make that call. I think when you look at things for what really took place, Mr. Amada talking about the fact that these were human lives in a pipeline. He said the report showed Paria resorted to a bureaucratic approach towards the tragedy and issued a no-dive order, even when there were divers on site and ready to carry out a rescue. And for him, he defines that as being criminal.
That is utter disregard for human life. And there is no other way to express it. And even in those circumstances, when there are persons who are saying that there's no chance, they don't want you to go in, but there are other persons who are willing to take that risk. Everything that we do on a daily basis, there's some level of risk. And with that calculated risk, we must proceed to do what is best. It is human nature. Survival is human nature. And it did not remain human nature for those in power and those with the authority on that night in question. Yeah. And that must change.
When you talk about calculated risk, I must ask you if the legal team has calculated into the factor that, the DPP could ask the police service to engage in an independent investigation without reference to the evidence before the Commission of Inquiry. No, I'm saying straightforward, many of us are not going to hold our breath for that. But have you calculated the fact that there definitely would not be such a move or any request by the DPP to call on the Commissioner of Police to do such a thing?
It is certainly a possibility, but I know, firstly, time is of the essence because they do have to act within a certain time. So there will be changes within the near future. If we are to see those changes, it will occur in the near future. And of course, I have no say in that regard as to whether those steps will be taken. And it is a nightmare, if I may say, to question that there's even a small likelihood that steps will not be taken. But I, at this point, would consider that this report is fresh, that there's a window of opportunity now, and I do have faith in our system. I do have faith in our country, and that things will be done.
I'm glad that you have that faith, honestly and truly, but I need to ask you something outside, taking you out of the legal realm here just a bit, and it can be a bit mischievous, but I'm asking you this. I mean, if you had to give us on a scale of 1 to 10, as far as political influence dealing with this matter, that may indeed somehow hinder us seeing justice being meted out to the victims and the families, of course. On a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put it at?
I won't even be able to answer that question. I have no influence. So therefore, I would not put myself in a position to even give you a guess.
But you seem rather confident that the right channels are going to be pursued and the right process is going to be looked upon by those in authority.
And yes, it is my approach, and it is somewhat I'm being positive, I would say.
And what do you say to folks who are looking on and saying that directing the police to take an independent statements from witnesses who appeared before the commission, and of course disregarding the commission of inquiry and investigating folks who are actually there on site? There are folks who are going to weigh in and say, well, hasn't that passed? Hasn't the horse bolted out of the stable? I mean, that should have taken place when things were still fresh and there were people around that could have connected the dots.
Notwithstanding that the processes can commence, the processes can be executed and properly completed.
All right. Now, of course, Mr. Ramada has also called on the state-owned Paria Fuel Trading Company to make an ex gratia payment of at least $5 million to each of the families. He made it quite clear that it sounds like a lot of money, but it really isn't, because that is the mechanical aspect of what those persons would have earned. Please expand on that for us.
If I may, that figure, it's not even about the money as Mr. Ramada would have expressed. These families lost a human life individually, each of them. And the value that human brought to their lives can never be quantified by dollars and cents. Of course, it's a sad reality that our jurisprudence and our courts have developed the law where, for instance, in circumstances where persons are injured, that if you lose a limb, they actually are able to quantify that in dollars and cents. And surprisingly, you would not believe it's not very high. Because if it is, for instance, I give you an example, someone they sustain an injury, they lose a leg. You would agree with me, their body is no longer the same. That person will never be able to function in the way that they did prior to that accident. Now imagine a person's life is lost. The value that person brought to their job, to their family, to everyone around them, that person is lost. And to imagine that we must now quantify that loss into dollars and cents is unimaginable for me, and inhumane, if I may say. So I would, at the end of the day, conclude by saying that there would never be sufficient amount of money that can quantify to justify the loss that these families sustain. Because it's not about money. It's about justice. It's about accountability. And if, to an extent, some level of ex gratia payment would do that, I, again, want to trust that the relevant authorities and companies will do what is right at the end of the day.
And I want to make this clear, and you can please back me up on this. Now, these are two separate issues here as far as ensuring that justice is served and the fact that these families do deserve some sort of financial compensation, some ex gratia payment. Because we don't want to give the impression that, hey, this money is paid and that's it, the door is closed. Because when you go back to the core, to the meat of the case, and you had Mr. Budram's evidence before the commission that the man was still alive. And that underscores the urgent need to rescue them. That alone tells us quite a lot. These men were still alive. Their lives meant nothing. It was not a priority to save them. So I want to make sure that people understand that as far as ensuring that there's some financial ex gratia payment for the family, that in itself does not take Paria off the hook, off the line, as to not ensuring that justice is meted out to those victims.
And you are certainly correct about that. There are steps that must be taken. Firstly, an ex gratia payment, to be clear, it's an amicable resolution. It is a means of giving this family some level of relief after having gone through this process without having to proceed to file a claim in a court. And notwithstanding this, their right of action remains, their liability remains, and if the authorities have to take steps, it is entirely at their discretion.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Trebouhansingh. How long have you been an attorney, practicing attorney?
I'm very young in practice, actually. I'm glad that you asked. I've been in practice. This is my 6th year in practice.
All right, and this is a case of, I mean, of such a magnitude. What was your biggest challenge being part of this legal team?
My biggest challenge, not being able to help the family more than we did at the end of the day, because no matter what we do, we cannot bring back their loved ones. And that is the greatest pain that came with dealing with this matter.
Yeah, that must have been something for you. I mean, in 6 years practicing attorney and having to be part of a legal team dealing with the fact that lives that could have been saved was not made a priority. And now today you still have faith in that system and belief in the system that things can work out?
Well, you've heard that I've been in this practice for 6 years. Whilst I may have at times critical views about certain things, in this circumstance, when all we want to see is that the family obtain some level of justice, I'm not just going to criticize our system before we give the relevant authorities an opportunity, the companies an opportunity to do that which is right. So at this point, I want to see how the cards play off, and we are hopeful that it goes in the appropriate and the right direction.
I hope so as well. I mean, really and truly, I wish you and your entire team the best of luck. I mean, we are watching all this thing has captured the country, the essence of the fact that you have human life that simply was not looked at as important enough to save says quite a lot. And then things just started to go down a bureaucratic road where, you know, we were lost at all of this. So I wish you and the entire team, I mean, we're not holding our breath because many people would say, listen, I've seen this before, but it is the system. It is not perfect. But at the end of it all, I believe that things would, and hopefully work out in the best interest. Any closing comments? Go right ahead.
I would, firstly, I'd say thank you for the opportunity to be on your program. Of course, on behalf of our office, Ramla and Company, we are certainly grateful to all the support and all the involvement in being able to convey the message of the families of the beloved divers. And further, we would like to add that it is that this dissemination of the information, this process through which people are able to learn and understand what has happened, it is a process of growth. And I do have a positive response that moving forward, things, and I'm certainly hopeful that things will change.
I hope so too. Thank you so much for taking time to link with us here this evening. Thank you so much, Mr. Ved Trebouhansingh, attorney at law, practicing out of Mr. Ramada's law firm.